All right. Good evening, everyone. I hope you guys are having a terrific Monday. Good to see you tonight, this evening. A wonderful start to another week. And are we in summer? Yes, I think we are in summer, finally, at last. Spring is over and we're getting ready for the summer. So hopefully everyone is doing well. I already see a few people in the chat ready for some Monday night musing with your hostess, Sound Engraver. And we're going to be talking about science fiction. And I think we're going to be talking about science fiction more in a general sense, but also just talking about it through the lens of Isaac Asimov in the Foundation series. Now, I will welcome the chat. Thank you, my wonderful prof, for confirming. Thank you so much. That I look good and I sound great. That's important. You know, audio is important to me, of course, and video. I don't want it to be all chopped up and stuff. So a couple of things. We're just going to be talking about science fiction, its importance. I think what Asimov has done with science fiction. He's not the first, obviously, but his works have greatly influenced people like Frank Herbert with Dune, the space fantasy feel, you know, what we see with George Lucas in Star Wars, and that concept of Joseph Campbell. Not so much the hero's journey, but just the scope of science fiction and world building, and really what science fiction is for. Now, here's the thing. Before I welcome the chat, I'm only going to be referring to the first book. This is one of 7 books, and it's the first book of the Foundation Trilogy. You've got a prelude or a prequel, whatever. It's called actually Prelude. I think the first book, the prequel, is called Prelude. Prelude to Foundation. But this book, the first of the trilogy, is really the second book. It's almost kind of like Chronicles of Narnia, where The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe is the second book, the chronology of it, but it's seen as the seminal start of that whole series. Even though I think Magician's Nephew is the first, whatever. So I'm only going to be referring to things that may happen in this book. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to give you spoilers. One reason is I think people should, if they're very much interested in classic science fiction, I think they should just read the book for themselves. The other thing, too, is this is a really intense, really complicated plot involving economics and politics and predictions involving mathematics and stuff like that. There's a lot of things in this book. It's very, very dense. And so I really couldn't conduct a cohesive narrative of the story. That being said, there are probably YouTube videos on this story. Actually, there are YouTube videos on the trilogy, not on this book itself. But you can, if you want to, you can look at the premise of this book on pages like Wikipedia. I would just recommend getting this book. I actually got the second book. This is the professor's copy, and then I got myself the copy of the second book. I'm actually reading the second book with free shipping, $4.95 on eBay. It's a paperback. There's a little bit of wear and tear here, a little bit on the back, but the book inside is as good as new. So I'm just starting to read. I'm kind of about 50 pages in the second book. So basically a little bit of a background. Well, let's get to the chat first, and then we'll talk a little bit about my background in science fiction and what you guys think as well. So let us welcome the chat. We will start off with, well, I think Go Team Ghost Planet forever. I think she was first, but the chat made it disappear because it was probably really early. I think I set it up around 5 o'clock. So if Go Team, if you had commented right after, it's like a 2-hour threshold before it cuts out before the stream. So welcome. Good to see you. Professor Geek says, hello, beautiful. I can't wait to hear your insights on this one. I know you're a big fan. Yeah, I really do appreciate the series so far. Big Al Presents says this of Foundation. I didn't see this quote. Maybe I missed it. I don't think this is in the first book, but and if it's in the TV series, I'm not watching the TV series. No way. I'm not watching that stuff. Childishness comes almost as naturally to a man as to a child. Isaac Asimov Foundation, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of his, you know, political heroes in the book said something like that, and probably very much may have said it, because there are some pretty interesting figures in this book. Um, and then I say no spoilers, so I'm not giving you spoilers just because the narrative is just really dense, and I think people should, you know, again, if they want to, I would say I've read a lot of classic science fiction that I don't care for at all. I understand the importance of some of these stories, but I wasn't really engaged. Maybe Asimov Foundation is just my cup of tea. It might not be everyone's cup of tea. For instance, one of the books I just did not care for was Stranger in a Strange Land. It was interesting for 20 pages, and then I just thought, well, I just don't know where this is going. Also, Brave New World. Brave New World is conceptually very, very interesting, a story. I really wasn't engaged with the narrative and with the characters. So people are really going to, I would say with classic science fiction, it's going to be hit or miss. People are going to like one story and then recommend it to a friend, and that friend doesn't like that story, but maybe like another story. That's just how science fiction goes. It's just so vast, as far as stories are concerned. So no spoilers. Please, if you guys do know the story, no spoilers regarding, you know, this book or subsequent stories as well, because I'm in the, you know, second third of the trilogy in the second book. So and all of that. And Jigwa says, "Are you going to blind us with science? Maybe science fiction, not science." Dr. Y says, "I know nothing about the series. This will be intriguing." I hope so. I hope I at least get people interested in it, at least on, from a conceptual point of view, or from the concept of it, I should say. Ace is in. Behind the rewatches, we'll be enjoying this in the future. Thank you. And I did get your email on your soundtrack. I haven't had a chance to listen to it. I've pretty much up until yesterday, I've been really, really busy. All right. And Randall Andrews is here. Welcome, Randall. And yes, that is an interesting series. Yes. And Go Team Ghost Planet is, talking about an avatar change yet again. All right. And anyone else? Soundtracks with Birdman. Welcome. I did see your last video, but I won't comment because I know you want to wipe a certain event from your memory. But I'm very, very sorry to hear that you had that happen to you. I've played in orchestras, and I've also seen orchestras that are not up to snuff. They're not at their A game, and especially when you pay for it, it's kind of like, come on. My last symphony actually was in North Carolina, and it was actually a free ticket because I was a music teacher, so I got a free ticket. I'm like, oh, cool, I'll go. But the tickets were $40, and I remember being so thankful that I did not spend a dime on that performance, because I got the feeling that they were very capable. The conductor was great. He was phenomenal, but he was doing so much, asking so much of the orchestra, and they were not giving him anything. And I think he was a substitute. I think he was a conductor in residence. And the impression I got of the orchestra was they were ready to have a few drinks afterward. It was like a shift. They wanted to be done. And I was like, no, the energy was not there at all. Not there at all. So I know what it's like to be disappointed, but I didn't, that last one, I didn't pay for it. So I would have probably been a lot madder if I did pay for it. But now, having said that, we can erase from your memory that event. Excuse me, got a cough. All right. All right, a few things. Well, Final Fantasy fan is here. Welcome. Randall Andrew. Wait, you're saying it's a challenging book? It is a little bit, but it's not as. It's dense. I will say it is dense, but it's not. It's not science. It's not scientifically dense. I don't think it's as old as Arthur C. Clarke 2001. I can't remember when that was published. Well, when was the movie made? Because I thought that was a joint project. 2001 Space Odyssey. Or was it an adaptation? I can't remember. I feel like the professor would know, or Big Al would know, that kind of trivia. But you do say, we will get to the topic soon. You do say Asimov or Arthur C. Clarke. Okay, so that's a good question. I actually like them both as my favorite science fiction writers. So Asimov really brings in world building as the scope of a galactic empire, for instance. You get the feeling of impressiveness and space and scope. He's very good at world building, but he's even, I would say he's even better with things like political and economic intrigue. You know, what would happen in an actual galactic empire. In fact, I think he was inspired by the Roman Empire to some extent. And that's what he said the premise for the foundation, you know, just the premise for the foundation is the fall or the gradual decline of a great empire and what that does, you know, catastrophically, what that does to a whole galaxy of people of you know, inhabited worlds. So I would say Asimov really is A plus when it comes to political intrigue and economic and in socio-political intrigue and the ramifications of something to fall in the future. Arthur C. Clarke is a genius with world building in the intimate sense. Like, so like astronauts coming upon Halley's Comet. I think there was a crew with Haywood Floyd. I think that was the third book, and they landed on Halley's Comet, and the way he described the comet was so beautiful. It was just, you know, I remember such, you know, vivid description of it. Like he described it as the valley of black snow. I mean, it was just I could see what he was seeing with his writing. He's intimate with his world building in that respect, but he's also very intimate with introspection. When you get in the psychology of HAL 9000, you're forever changed. He is a genius when it comes to introspection. Asimov does not work with introspection in these books. He works with more scope of the human populace and reaction. He's very much about a, and we'll get into the. I have some notes. We'll get into what he works with. He works with people reacting to things, not so much with introspection. But they're both A plus in their own way. But so I would say both. I don't prefer one to the other. I think they're both really good in the science fiction world. All right. Oh, Owen Lister is in the house. Welcome. Welcome. And I think we have a new person too. Let's see. Evar Jans, are you aware of the abomination that Apple Plus is doing on Foundation? So yeah. Okay. So good news. Evar, I hope I'm spelling or saying your name right. Good news. I'm only talking about my experience with the book. I don't even know what that TV series looks like. In fact, I was reading this book, you know, a couple months back, not having, I didn't even really know that Apple or any streaming service, was it Apple or Paramount? I thought it was Apple. Okay, one of the yeah, maybe it was Apple. I'm sorry, I always get that confused. I totally forgot there was a Foundation series at work, and I was reading it, and then I was looking up characters. You know, I was looking up characters, and then poof, this TV series pops up on the search engine, and I'm like, I'm sure it's bad. I have a very specific world. It's kind of like Dune. I haven't seen the movie Dune, and I'm not going to watch it for. If I do watch the movie, I won't watch it for a long time because I have such a very specific world of Arrakis in mind. A very specific, you know, Duke Leto looks very specific to me. Jessica looks specific. Paul Atreides. I mean, they all look very specific. The way it's nighttime on the sand looks very specific to me. The sandworms look specific. So I don't really want to watch the film until like a few years down the road if I decide to. Now, maybe Dune is good. The film Dune is good. I don't know. I don't know the adaptation of Dune. But I don't even want to touch the TV series because some of these figures in this book, one political hero, he has a presence and personality, and we'll get to that a little bit later. He has a presence and charisma. He looks a very specific way, and I think some actor or actress, maybe a they, the, whatever they call themselves now, he, she, something, I they don't look the part at all. Not even as a young man, not even as a young politician. And I'm like, "No, that's not Hardin. That's the politician that I really like. That's not Salvador Hardin at all, at all." Even if the actor ages, 40 years down the road, it's not gonna I just know they're not carrying the same charisma and presence as this politician in this book, and, it's great, it's great. So, no, I'm not talking about the TV series at all. So, um, uh okay, yeah, you make really good points. Asimov tends to be more of a big picture guy, and, New Dune is homogeneously bleak. 69 for 2001 Space Odyssey. Asimov was published in the 50s, and actually I think I think it was a set of short stories even before that, I think in the 1940s. So Asimov in that respect did come first. Yeah, very good. Oh, 1968 or 1969. Okay. So yeah, the Asimov stories came first. Now, just to clarify, did Arthur C. Clarke work on? Oh my goodness, I'm blanking on that famous filmmaker's name right now. Sorry. Streaming. You forget very popular names. But you'll come up with that in the chat. Oh man, that bothers me. He's very famous filmmaker. The man who worked on 2001: Space Odyssey. Anyway, I think he worked with Arthur C. Clarke at the time. So. Anyway, so anyone else before I get into this? So, yeah, it looks like. Oh yes, thank you, Owen Stanley Kubrick. Yeah, I knew it started with S. Thank you, Al. I knew Al would come to it too. So Owen makes a point on the John Carter series. I'm currently on the Warlord of Mars right now. I'm becoming a fan of the character in the world. He kind of predates a lot of classic superheroes, and I think John Carter, even though it's on Mars, I think that was kind of like the stage of science fantasy, like a very specific genre, which is cool too. I like that feel as well. Yeah, okay. I got to make this point of and I hope I'm saying your name right. In the series, Salvor Hardin is played by a very, very young POC warrior, girl type. So girl type, when he's supposed to be a balding middle-aged man and bureaucrat. Not really bureaucrat, not in the bad sense anyway. Yeah, he's a politician, but when you see him first in the book, he's 32 years old, so he's got some life behind him. And then he becomes a political hero at 62 years old. And he's this robust, I'm like picturing like this, kind of big, burly, just broad. He's not even described actually. He's only described as broad shoulders, but I'm seeing this big charismatic guy who's just not taking flack from anyone. He has confidence even when he doesn't have confidence, if that makes sense. He will not show you he's not confident. He will always come forward as a confident individual. And so you got to have like a big man for that. Like, yeah. Yeah. And he could be of any ethnicity, but I picture like more, to be honest, I kind of picture like, I guess, Slavic or something between like East Europe and maybe Russia, but with dark curly hair. I don't know. I just picture a very present kind of guy. So anyway. Okay, Jigwat, see you later. All right. So yeah, let's get started. Let's get started. So here's my background on composition. No, here's my background on science fiction. The science fiction that I'm going to be talking about and examples I'm going to be talking about actually will be really related to books. I'm a reader of science fiction. I will be the first to admit I don't know all the stories because it's pretty vast. It's this genre has quite the history, and I also haven't watched science fiction TV series. I haven't seen Babylon 5. I haven't seen Farscape. I haven't seen Stargate. I saw the movie. I haven't. I've only seen like a handful of episodes of Star Trek, the first, the original series. So I really do not know much about science fiction in the TV series format or the movie format. I'm coming from a place of reading books. So I might be actually a little bit boring. But if you guys have input, maybe I say something and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's this TV series, they did a good job with that." That you're more than welcome to talk about that. I'm very slow. If there's one thing, well, there's one thing. If there's one thing the professor knew about me going into our wonderful relationship, um, he discovered that I don't really watch TV or movies, and I'm very slow when I do watch TV or movies. So we're in the same TV series, Agents of Shield. We started, I think, like last summer, and we still have two seasons left. I'm very slow when it comes to television, even when it's good television. And I think Agents of Shield is great. I love it so much, but I'm very slow. I watch 3 to 4 episodes on average a week, and that's just one day. That's on a Sunday. Whereas I would read a book more frequently. So same is true with movies. If we do watch a movie, I prepare myself to watch the movie. I just don't go sit on a couch and watch a movie. I just haven't had that built in probably since I was a kid. Because when I moved out of the house at 18 or 17, I didn't have TV forever. Like I was years without a TV. So it kind of like I started watching TV 17 years after not having TV. So I'm very slow. So any science fiction that I talk about is really my experience reading the books. So you're more than welcome to, talk about the sci-fi, the wonderful sci-fi TV series. Like as Big Al is saying, Professor D, get Sound Engraver caught up on the iconic sci-fi series. We will be starting one of those series after Marvel, after our adventure with Marvel. So, oh, he knows. He's probably very much anticipating that. So yeah, so that's me in a nutshell. So what I'm talking about with science fiction is either things like out of short stories or classic science fiction. So I got into just, if you guys ever wanted to get into science fiction, in books, there are things to consider, and I'll relay those things as I talk about my experience. Um, I got into science fiction around my master's, getting my master's. In Wisconsin, there was between semesters a 4 to 5 week break. And I had my tuition remitted, and my only job was really grading tests, for a professor. I was, yeah, slim pickings, but I didn't go out because it was in the middle of winter in Wisconsin. And if you know anything about the Midwest in the middle of winter, which is usually spans from 5 to 7 months long, sometimes you just don't get out. Sometimes there are very, very long cold spells where it's almost not even safe to go out, like for more than an hour or two at a time, even when you've got like 3 layers of clothes on you. And so that was my experience in Wisconsin. And I'm like, well, me now would look back and say, well, she should have composed music, but I didn't. I actually spent the 5 weeks of just recreation. I'm like, what am I going to do? I could surf the internet, which I don't really do. I could explore YouTube, which I don't really do. I can start watching movies, which I don't really do. And I didn't want to get into the habit of that. So I'm like, well, you know what? I should start reading books again, non-academic fiction, And so I'm like, well, I've got these ideas for scenes for stories that I want to write in the future. So maybe I should get into science fiction. And the first science fiction book that I ever got into, which was one of the best, is, of course, 1984. If you really want to start with classic science fiction, you cannot go wrong with 1984. You can go wrong with a lot of other classic science fiction books if you want my 2 cents on that. So, yeah, Orwell, that was a really important, significant, seminal piece of fiction. And I made the mistake of thinking that every single science fiction classic that I would read after that would be as good as 1984, and it wasn't. It's just a piece that is well written, conceptually very interesting. Of course, 1984 is referenced all the time, especially with our political climate. But I did read some interesting shorter pieces by Bester. very, I mean, a lot of vulgar language. A lot of science fiction has some vulgar language, which is a lot for a Christian to handle. I know some Christians say, "Oh, I swear all the time." I was like, I just don't swear. It's just not part of my conscience to do that. And so sometimes I would come into a lot of decadence and vulgarity, but really well written stories. A lot of good science fiction drama. And I think it was my second year in graduate. So that was my first winter, 5 weeks. And then my second year, I was into Ender's Game and also Isaac Asimov. So I did read, what books did I read? There are 7 books in this series, and I will read them for you. I read Foundation, which is this one, Foundation and Empire, which is this one, and then second Foundation, and then Foundation's Edge. So there are 2 books after Foundation's Edge, and then a prequel of sorts. And so I read 4 of the 7. And is it 10 years ago now? Yeah, actually, yeah, it's about 10 years since I had last read it. And I remember not being an avid reader, or at least not an experienced reader. And I remember liking it. I didn't get it all. I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. That's engaging and stuff like that. Okay, I liked it." I wasn't put off by it by a lot of the stories. A lot of the stories did put me off. And Foundation didn't. It kept me just reading. I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." And I think Foundation's Edge was at least my favorite at the time. But I'm very much looking forward to reading it again and reading the trilogy and all of it. So it's been 10 years, and then I decided, you know what? Professor Geek, of course, is exploring the EU, and I really love Star Wars, and I do appreciate some of the EU that I read, but I just had this, itch to go back to the classic science fiction and maybe read some good contemporary science fiction. And so I was, I think the prof was preparing something in the kitchen or grabbing something, and then I was looking at his bookshelf, and I said, "Oh, he has Foundation." And so I started reading the premise, and I was like, "Oh, I feel like I should read this again." And I did, and I'm like, it's good. It's nice. There's a lot to be had and to explore. And this is after reading Dune. I needed a break from Dune. I needed a break from the Dune saga. It was a very visceral experience for me. I enjoyed it, but I just like it's just too much for me to read it back to back. So I'm like, okay, let me read something lighter. But Asimov's Foundation is really highly influenced Frank Herbert with his world of Dune, and also Star Wars. So we'll get into some of the specifics. So I'm not going to be giving you spoilers. I just want to give you some concepts of world building to see if you guys are interested. Again, it's only this book. It's not all 7 books. It's not the trilogy. It's only Foundation. So let's go ahead and get started with that. All right. So what Asimov has introduced to the science fiction world is a lot. With his iRobot series, he really he really paved the way for things like androids with introspection, or humanoids, or robotic. What is that fine line? Of the similarities of robotic thinking and autonomy and personal autonomy versus what is programmed. Now, I've read his short stories on his robots and that culture. It's been years ago, and I will be exploring his iRobot series as the novels, because I know, like, I even know that some examples, like Data from Star Trek, that had been also personalized in its own unique way, but also coming from Asimov's great concept of what really distinguishes a robot from a human being. And when I say robot, I don't mean that in a dismissive way. I mean that as that is what he's called. He even had a special term for their way of thinking, and I can't think of it right now because I haven't read the story in ages. But he's introduced the concept of how close can you be human before, how close can you be to a human before you are human, or how close can a robot respond before a human interacts with them in a very human way. That really was Asimov who started that. Um, so I really did appreciate that. Now, what I want to talk about with Asimov and Foundation is that he really was the forerunner. He was really the pioneer to conceptualize a galactic empire and a galaxy of worlds that are populated by humans. And he wanted to establish this world building involving a human galactic empire that had a rise and fall, that had a position of power, and what could be done, or what's the cause and effect to create its decline and ultimately downfall. This actually is said, the events of the stories. The story begins, I think, 500 years before a catastrophic decline of the empire. So the empire is still alive and ticking in this book, but it's on the trajectory of going into a time of anarchy and barbarism, and it's seen as the Dark Ages. But the Galactic Empire. So obviously, when you think of Galactic Empire, at least for me, I think of Star Wars. I know there's Warhammer 40K, for instance. There's probably I don't know if the series Halo works with that. Maybe they work with more factions and stuff like that. But the Galactic Empire. I mean, Dune, the Imperium. That's a galactic empire. And what Asimov really started pushing was this that really affected science fiction as a genre was this idea that what would cause the fall of a great empire, of a great galactic empire? Well, really it really would be a centralized government, a centralized unit in a planet in the center of a galaxy. And the more people were populating other regions of the galaxy and stretching further and further out, of the center of the galaxy, the harder, the much more difficult the empire could, contain them. Can maintain its control of the human population. So there would be this natural fall. Just to give you some world building ideas that Asimov brought into the Foundation, he was really, I don't know if he was the first, but he definitely was the one known for this term, ecumenopolis, ecumen, which is polis. I don't know the Greek pronunciation. Sorry, oikumen is world and polis is city. So if I could say this right, ecumenopolis is translated to world city, and that is the city of Trantor. So Trantor is the central, the one planet, the most densely populated planet. I think it's in the Milky Way galaxy, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I think because the way they're describing the galaxy is like, yeah, I think that's Milky Way. But I think actually, honestly, I think I may have overlooked that the Milky Way was here somewhere. It's probably here. I kind of want to see it now live, but I'll refrain. And I'm going to actually just read an excerpt of Trantor, describing what it is. But basically, it's a world city. It's a planet that is completely densely populated with over 40 billion people live on this world of Trantor. And I think the land mass actually was 20% smaller than that of Earth's. Well, then how do you do that? How do you have a planet that has a land mass, that's, 20% smaller, in size, or not in size, but landmass. Well, how do you do that? Well, you go down. For 40 billion people or more, you are building down and down and down and down. And many of these people do not, for probably years at a time, if not their lifetime, they don't see the sun. In fact, I think it's described in the first book, the book that I haven't read. It's described where they go into rooms for simulation, like sunlight, simulation of sunlight in a scientific way, where they actually are received, the nutrients of sun. But they actually do not see sky. They actually do not see, the people so further down, or even at surface level, they just do not see the sky because of all the metal and the buildings, what we would call skyscrapers, but I'm sure these structures are so massive that they're not really called skyscrapers. And there's this one character that actually has the ability to go up through, to a tower to see the sky. And really anyone in the population, they do have access to see the sky. They just don't prefer it. Now they're not like underground, gnomes or whatever. They're still people like you and me. But I find it fascinating that the world it's an entire city. It's called the World City, the Ecumenopolis. And what does that remind you of? In the world of Star Wars, that's Coruscant. Now, Star Wars doesn't touch upon a very big problem it would be to actually have a world city exist. So let me grab a swig of water. Excuse me. So I have these notes here. So yeah, the world city of Trantor has 40 plus billion people. And this is seen as the most industriously advanced planet. And this is where the empire resides at the time of these events taking place. So 40 plus billion people or more. And it comes to the point where Trantor's in this really vulnerable state because they're not self-sustaining. That planet is not self-sustaining. Just kind of think of this. Think of this like we think of like trades between countries on Earth. But think of this. Trantor relies on 20 worlds. So 20 other worlds. It relies on those worlds to produce agricultural food and necessities. So 20 worlds, and daily there are fleets of 10,000 or tens of thousands, I should say, tens of thousands of ships coming to Trantor daily to give the residents of Trantor their needs, their necessities. Now, I haven't read the book that comes before it, before Foundation, but there actually was a trajectory where there were gardens and oceans and farms. And Trantor at that time was a very, very much a self-sustaining planet. But the more it became centralized in its governments, the governance of the empire, for instance, the more they were in this kind of reliant state of decadence. Like, no, we want all the best. Like, basically every resident is part of this administration. The 40 plus billions of people are really admin of some kind for the empire. They are administrators, and officers and all sorts of people that live a life of, I don't know if they live a life of luxury, but they live a life of a kind of supremacy that wants to be decadent. That, when I say decadent, I mean it's more of a lavishness. Like they're technologically advanced. They're industriously advanced. So it kind of gives that aura like, well, I deserve all the goods. Well, the more you deserve, the more you think you want the lavishness, that kind of lavish lifestyle, well, the more you're going to be depending on getting that, rather than thinking about things you should prioritize, which is, okay, let's get the farms in order and let's get the crops in order and let's just basic needs, bread, clean water, vegetables, all that stuff. Well, there was a trajectory where Trantor didn't prioritize over that. and instead they just wanted the high-end delicacies. Well, all of that at first was imported to them. Then they started relying more on the outer worlds, and now they solely rely on the outer worlds to bring them food, necessities, supplies daily to sustain such a densely populated planet. Well, the more vulnerable people are, the more vulnerable the empire makes that planet. Well, it's going to cause riots and it's going to cause revolts, from neighboring worlds, and it's going to bring contention against the empire. Now, the empire so far is still intact, and then I'm not seeing the repercussions of anarchy, but the anarchy actually is happening outside the periphery. The anarchy and the barbarism and the claim to independence away from the empire is happening on the edge, or at the edge, of the galaxy, from one end to the next. And so I find that really fascinating, where this is kind of a warning. I kind of like it. Asimov, in his own creative way, was warning about the repercussions of centralized government and not being self-sustaining as a planet. So, and he was talking about the empire being so central, not just the centralized government, but it's like it's physically at the center of the Milky Way. Now we know at the center of the Milky Way is a star. It's kind of, isn't it a black hole? I haven't done science in a long time, but I think there was something about a gravitational rotation and black hole for the Milky Way. So I don't know how pragmatic that is in the world of science fiction, but the center, the hub of all sorts of imports and exports and space travel. Well, that's fine for a little bit until people start migrating to the periphery of the galaxy. And the more the worlds out there are inhabited, the less control the empire has. And then they start becoming a lot, the people of the empire start to become a lot more vulnerable to political revolts and chaos. And the hero of this foundation, Harry or Hari, I think it's Harry. I'm just going to say Harry Seldon. Harry Seldon, this figure in the vault right there. He's the hero. He's really actually the Christ figure, warning people of a future, and having people consent to saving humanity from a dark age of 30,000 years. There's an inevitable dark age, and so far the way things are going, it could be 30,000 years. He has mathematics that causes these predictions, but he wants to do his best to save humanity and reduce that dark age to 1,000 years, so 1 millennium. And all of this is happening about 500 years before the actual dark ages of the empire. Very fascinating. Very fascinating. Okay, so let's see if I think I said everything I wanted to say about Trantor and the Galactic Empire. Let's go ahead and take a quick break and see what's going on with the chat. All right. Okay, let me, I'm just kind of going through the chat really quickly. There we go. Okay. All righty. So we'll talk a little bit more, and then I'll definitely read through most of the comments, or all of the comments, whatever appears on StreamYard. All right, so you've got, I think what makes Foundation particularly intriguing to me is this well, really its premise, the rise, and not really the rise, actually. There's no rise of an empire. The empire is supreme, it reigns supreme, but there's this trajectory where it's going to be on the decline, and then all the worlds are going to be suffering a pretty extensive, many generations, a time of many generations where there's not even just political upheaval, but just total anarchy and barbarism. And I find it really, I find it so wonderful to talk about Harry Seldon. Now, Harry Seldon, at the time of Foundation, the first book of the trilogy, he's really the hero of the story, but it's so amazing. I mean, as you could see, the thumbnail, the picture, the image that I used, he's an old man. He's an old man, and he's a scientist. He's working with a kind of science that it's kind of described as his generating the science, but it really is a I don't want to say synthesis, but it's the integration of psychology and mathematics, and it's called psychohistory. And what psychohistory is the mathematics used to predict the response of mass populations to certain political crises, or even economic crises, whatever the crisis is. It's a social crisis, but it's crises because there are many of them. So he's using this very interesting form of psychology, predicting the outcome of certain things. He's predicting an event based on how how massive populations are reacting to certain politics. Now, the nature of the politics isn't really in detail. It's yeah, you've got kings. So you've got the empire that's on the decline, even though the empire at the time is not feeling anything. But you've got people on the outer part of the galaxy revolting in a way, saying, "Well, the empire is not really out here, so we're going to claim. Not only are we going to claim independence, but we're going to be claiming kingship. Okay, I'm a king here, you're a king there. We hate each other. It's like the four kingdoms, and then you've got this tiny little um, backwater planet called Terminus, and we'll talk about Terminus. But going back to Harry Seldon, he developed. He's really the first to be known by this idea of psychohistory, using psychology and mathematics to predict future events. That's how he can predict. Now, this is kind of pseudoscience. It doesn't have to be possible in our real world. It's just a very interesting concept. But he uses the psychology and mathematics to predict political events going into the future, like 50 years into the future, 200 years into the future, and he knows these events. He knows these political, social, and economic crises because of his psychohistory, and his mission is to create this foundation of scientists and scholars who understand the nature of political and socio-economic events to further push this, I don't want to say agenda, but this thing that Seldon had to save humanity. He can't completely save humanity. There will be a dark age of 1,000 years, but the way things are going with his predictions, if things ensue in certain ways and there are political factors and political heroes along the way, well, by the end of 500 years, since his stating his psychohistory, well, it's 30,000 years of dark ages, being reduced down to just only 1,000. Now, that's a lot of lifetimes, and that stinks. But he still thinks, you know what, even though it's too late to save all of humanity, even though the decline and the fall of the empire is inevitable, we can still save many lives way out into the future. So yes, life will be hard for 1,000 years. We can't save those people, but we can save people way out into the future and establish a second foundation. Now, when he made this isn't really spoiling anything. And by the way, it's so fascinating how he interacts with certain people. But when he made his psychohistory known, first of all, he was very old. He's a very old man at this point. And when he makes it public, he's 2 years before his death. This is 2 years before his death. And the empire sees it as treasonous. They find it to be Basically, I guess they would equate it as, well, no, you're stirring up propaganda. This is nonsense, and this is treasonous and stuff like that. So they arrest him and they put him on trial. But instead of executing him, they instead he pretty much convinces them. He says, listen, you have no way of controlling the downfall of the empire, but at least help me, allow me to work on this as much as I can before I die. I'm 2 years from death. I'm dying. He says that. It's at the start of the book. It's not spoiling anything. So instead of executing him, they exile him. They put him on. They send him to a backwater world where he's not inconveniencing anyone. So there he establishes the foundation of scientists and scholars, and they set up a project called the Encyclopedia, Encyclopedia Galactica, which really is to gather all the knowledge of the worlds and all the knowledge of the empire, so people could turn back to these to this encyclopedia for knowledge and to these archives for, oh, okay, if dark times, we need knowledge, we need to know how to work with all this stuff again. But later in the book, I won't even say what's going on with Seldon even after his death, because that's not his only mission. He has a much from what I could see, at least from the books, he has a noble mission, establishing something else. So this is very interesting because Harry Seldon and his psychohistory really causes this juxtaposition. You've got the empire, which is really from whatever family or whatever time the empire is, thousands and thousands and thousands of years and hundreds of generations of this empire, So whoever is the emperor, well, that's one man or woman, who knows, trying to maintain control. This juxtaposition that Asimov brings from the emperor and Seldon. So the emperor tries to control humanity, whereas Seldon, the emperor is one man trying to control humanity for his own gain. And Seldon is trying to save humanity, not as one man, but as a joint operation of scientists and scholars. Now, there is something I am kind of confused about with the world building. Is the caveat with his psychohistory is that people can't really be a psychohistorian. They could be scientists and scholars, but they really can't be a psychohistorian because generally the public cannot know about his predictions or, let's see. Uh-oh. Okay. Did I froze. I saw myself freeze. Am I still here? Okay. I need confirmation, guys. Well, it looks like I'm still going. Okay. So I was in the middle of such a good point. So can I have confirmation that I am still alive? Anyone? Oh, picture just froze. Okay. See, when the picture freezes, I always think that the audio freezes as well. Okay, cool. Okay, so I may be thirsty. So I was talking about the juxtaposition where you've got the emperor represented by one man trying to control all of humanity, whereas Harry Seldon is one man trying to save humanity along with other scientists and scholars, and not only them, but families of scientists and scholars. So pretty much you've got this foundation populating this backwater planet called Terminus. And then Terminus gets into some trouble with some political upheaval, which is great. It's really fun to watch. It's really fun to see. But yeah, it's quite wonderful. So the caveat of Seldon's plan is that really he can only be the psychohistorian of the Foundation. Why? Because if he's got these accurate predictions, well, if other people had knowledge and it became generally known, whether it's through propaganda or if it's truth that people readily accept, well, what's going to happen if you can see into the future and you don't like what's happening in the future, you're going to do your best to control it. That's such a trope. I mean, actually, we're in the middle of, well, actually, we're toward the end of season 5 of Agents of Shield, and that's kind of what the characters are facing. It's like, no, we're not going to have this future, so they're doing what they can to find a way to stop certain events from happening. That's just a trope with science fiction in particular. So the caveat is that really it's not supposed to be public knowledge, but these events will play out in their own way. And I don't know, to be honest, even now, I don't really know how much, how many people know of the certain events. Here's how Seldon does it. And I love this because it really extends his legacy. So he's trying to bring this about 2 years before his death. He's an old man, and I think that's he's kind of like he's the Christ-like figure in this world because he's trying to save humanity, and so he passes on, and the foundation continues, and then 50 years later he's in this vault. He's got a message to say to people, and he's in a wheelchair. You can see, I mean, this is kind of, every time the population sees Harry Seldon, he's wheelchair bound because it's terminal. He whatever, it's old age. It might be I can't remember if he had a health condition, but he is very, very old. And then his predictions are verified. 50 years later, he says, "Okay, so I'm assuming something is happening right now," and people are like, "Oh yeah, that is happening." So he's validated as an important figure, but he can't. There can't be a school of psychohistorians, or for fear of the general population seizing control, saying we gotta stop this from happening. Well, no, the events have to happen for the Seldon effect to ensue. They call them Seldon crises. Those have to happen in order for things to come into place to bring about the dark age from 30,000 years to 1,000 years. So I love that idea of his message in a kind of a vault, the time vault as they call it, where he's this holographic image, because that's a beautiful representation of the extension of his legacy. His legacy continues even though he's long been dead. And I also love the idea of a hero. At least now in these books. Now, no spoilers, guys. I haven't read these stories in 10 years, so I have no idea the whole extensive nature of who these people are. But at least for the first book, Seldon is seen as a hero. And where was I going with that? Oh, I love the idea. I love the idea of an old man, not just an old man, but a very old man starting this. I think it's very fascinating, and I like the idea of someone. It doesn't have to be this adventurer. It doesn't have to be this superhero. And I don't say that lightly of superheroes, but it doesn't have to be a coming of age hero. Like I love that it's a scientist well into his 90s or whatever, trying to bring good about the world. So very, very, very interesting. All right. All right, looks like my video from YouTube is still moving. All right. Another thing that I really, really love about the Foundation is the political heroism, the political heroes. Obviously we have political heroes in our lifetime, with figures in World War II or the Civil War or all of that. We need political heroes. We need people in charge of things, whether it be generals acting on behalf of politicians or politicians, political figures. And I really do like the characters Salvor Hardin. It's kind of his name is hard to say. Salvor Hardin. And then also Hober Maller. Hober, man, these names are fine when I read them, but when I pronounce them out loud, it's hard to say. Mallow. So Hardin and Mallow. Hober, I think, is his first name. Now, Salvor Hardin is a politician. He's a mayor. He's the mayor of Terminus, the planet that has established this foundation. And he has to really work not just the population and not just activists, campaigning against him. He has to go and deal with kingships and warring kings, and then making sure those kings are not going against him. It's like, no, you're on this king's side and you're on this king's side and stuff like that. He has to be the cream of the crop diplomat to get things done. And there are moments in his story. He's got several chapters of story. There are moments in his story where he does not have the confidence, and he has to appear like he knows what he's doing. But he has a couple things. He has faith in the Seldon crises. He has faith in the crises. He has faith in Seldon, knowing that the Seldon, time vault and messages and predictions will play out however they play out. But there are things he has to thwart. There are things he has to kind of stop. And Terminus is always under threat of political figures and planetary kingships. The neighboring planets are like they're out to get Terminus. They don't like the Foundation, and they're out to get Terminus. And he's the first mayor of Terminus, and he does a lot of cunning. He's charismatic, and he's very cunning. He gets the best of the worst political leaders because he's a good political leader. Now, one thing is he's charismatic. He's got a lot of presence, and he's just fun to listen to. Like I read his dialogue, and he's a great person to be in the same room with. There's something very wholesome and hearty about this man's presence. But I think what makes him a good political hero is he really gets to the heart of vanity. He gets to the heart of politicians who are absolutely vain. They are absolutely power hungry and vain. They are fallible to the core, and they either try to save face or they try to show people that they are dominant, they are aggressive, and they are more formidable than they actually are. They're actually the way Asimov describes these political enemies of Hardin, and then the political enemies of Foundation is they're over the top absurd. They're very vain. They're wealthy. They're explosive with their anger. They're very impetuous, but they think because they have wealth and control, they think they are above failing. And Hardin knows that. He's a politician who knows the weaknesses of his opponents. And they basically, without going into the specific events, he pretty much strips a very powerful kingship just through cunning and knowing their weakness. And I think that's really refreshing to see. And he becomes, in so many ways, he becomes a political hero at the age of 62. That's really encouraging. I love that. I love protagonists being just dogged and determined and smart and cunning in their 60s. That's such an encouraging thing to see and to talk about. I'm not against coming of age heroes, but it's fun to see heroes who are politicians and also heroes who are in their 60s. Now he kind of comes off as a politician, like he's out for his own gain and stuff like that. And maybe he is, but he also knows that he has a planet to look out for. That there are people in the Foundation that do not like him. They think he's a politician trying to thwart their, trying to undermine them and who Harry Seldon is. And no, he's our hero, he's our guy. And he's not against Seldon, but he's looking after the planet he's mayor over. It's like, well, this is a backwater planet, but I gotta take care of these people because I'm mayor, for these people. So he's a very charismatic, wholesome character from what I've seen, and he's great. He's kind of like he's the do-gooder, but he also he has kind of the language like I don't know if he complains. He doesn't complain, but he's kind of I don't know if he's a good person as a character because again, Asimov doesn't work with introspection, but what he does is good, and I think that's enough. I think that's enough for me to say, hey, this guy is good. He not only protects his planet or does what he can to protect his planet from the kings, warring each other and then trying to take over their planet to establish as a military base. Well, he doesn't want that, and he's like, well, that's not going to be good for my people, but that's also not going to be good for what Seldon has in mind. So, or maybe it is actually no. It's sort of playing out to what Seldon has in mind. But again, it's dense. It's a lot of stories. You kind of have to take it in piecemeal. And then so he's a very wholesome politician. He just gets things done, and it's quite wonderful to see. So he's good. He's charismatic. And then Mallow is he's like a merchant. He's described as a merchant prince. He's like a trader. So he goes, not traitor, trader. Like I trade salt with you as you are giving me something. That kind of trader. So he's a merchant. And he's pragmatic. And he's like he's so no nonsense. Like he will he does something, again, no spoilers, but the actions he takes actually at first look pretty reprehensible until you see the bigger picture. And he's very no nonsense. He's like, you know what? Go ahead and put me to trial. Try me for murder, okay? And I'll prove to you that I did not. and he's also he goes against people trying to set up conspiracies against him, conspiracies against the Foundation, so again, it's a lot of political intrigue. It's not action like you see people fighting each other, like punching each other and gunning each other down and stuff like that, but it's more the anticipation of a population being obliterated under empirical control. So not empirical, imperial control. So he's also another hero. So that's what I love about Asimov, is that for the Foundation, at least, he's actually using merchants and politicians as the setting the scenes and getting things done. So I found that really, really refreshing. And I would say this too, I put this on my notes as well, is that no matter how bleak it looks as far as the whole galactic population, if you have a few people who conduct virtue, if you have the virtue of a few, well, that actually inspires the masses, because these few people, Seldon, Hardin, Mallow, they've actually inspired the masses. Well, Mallow's another. He's kind of funny because he does let Seldon's events play out at his own political expense, but he doesn't care. He's like, that's the way it goes, guys. Sorry. And then his closest friends, Hardin has a close friend who's like, Hardin, what are you doing? Like, I like you, man. You're my closest friend, but what are you doing? And then Mallow has the same. He has this confidant at the end of the book, and it's like, you realize you're doing this, and this is gonna look ugly. I won't give the details. It's like, that's how it has to be. If what Seldon says is true, that's what it has to be. So very interesting. So that's the first book, and all of that good stuff. Now let me go back to the chat And then I want to talk about just kind of the technical aspects. I think of the technical aspects of Asimov and what to look for. So writing techniques as well. Okay, so um, Professor says either Babylon 5 or Stargate SG-1 is next. Yeah, so put it to a vote. Which should it be first? Let's see. Owen Lister says my favorite sci-fi movies is the Verheven trilogy, which are the science fiction. I'm not familiar with the name, which are the science fiction action movies directed by Paul Verhoeven. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. For Verhoeven, starting with RoboCop, then Total Recall, and finally Starship Troopers. I thought Starship Troopers was Heinlein. Yeah. I don't think I could get into RoboCop. Maybe Total Recall. And I probably would read the book Starship Troopers. I heard that the movie is actually a parody of the book, so I don't know. And so I wouldn't know which I would like. But I don't really care for Heinlein's style of writing. I just didn't care for Stranger in a Strange Land, so maybe I wouldn't care for that book either. I listened to 1984, a very well written but depressing story in a good way. It's definitely very relevant to the times we're living in now. Again, like Dune to me is kind of depressing, and it's a well written story. 1984 is very depressing. It speaks to you. Like I remember finishing that last page, man, of that book, and I remember just being impacted for 2 weeks straight. It's very impactful. It moves you. Yeah, it's one of those books that really moves you. Sci-fi's Blade Runner. Yeah, Blade Runner's I love the premise of Blade Runner. It's again, it's kind of it's cyberpunk, it's grisly. I'm not a cyberpunk fan. I've read two cyberpunk novels. I couldn't finish one, even though the prose was so good. The world building was so good. But I didn't really care for cyberpunk. People are like, "Oh, you got to read Snow Crash." So I read Snow Crash, and it wasn't my thing. Just wasn't. I read the whole book, but it just wasn't my thing. That's not true. That is not true. I don't even want to know that if that is true. Speaking of troll, Prof, I think you're trolling me right now. Owen Lister says, when you mentioned a world city, the first thing that came to mind was Cybertron from the Transformers franchise. Yeah, again, I've never gotten into the Transformers franchise. There's a lot of science fiction out there. I mean, it's the scope is just it's the size of a universe. It's huge. Go Team Ghost Flying says, to quote Rush Hour 2, greed will imprison us all. Yeah, actually, so Owen, just to clarify, 1,000 years of suffering is a lot better than 30,000. So Seldon was to reduce a time span of 30,000 to 1,000, which is much better. Still stinks, for the 1,000 years, but it's much better than 30,000 years of civilization, or lack thereof, I should say. You say that sounds similar to the opening of Superman, the movie where Jor-El tried to warn the Council of Krypton's destruction, but they didn't listen and paid dearly for it. Yeah. Now just think of thousands and tens of thousands of worlds, and that's what you have. And actually, so Owen brings up Professor Geek's video for writing for the modern audience, and I do want to talk about the writing in Asimov, what to expect if you're interested in it, and really maybe what to avoid as well. Okay, so it looks like let's see how YouTube is looking. All right, so So a couple more things before we wrap it up. Uh, so if you are wanting to explore science fiction in the world of books, the classic science fiction, um, obviously something like 1984 is really good as well. I really do recommend Asimov, because even though it's really dense, there's a lot of concepts here. Okay, it's politically dense. It's got some characters who are very interesting, but they come and go. They'll be there for 8 chapters, and then you'll be 200 years down the road. Well, let's see. I can't remember. I know it's 50 years down the road, and then I think it's in 100 or 150 years down the road. So you are time jumping to other characters, because why? I mean, Foundation is about the trajectory, the 500-year kind of interim before the Dark Ages. So you kind of have to time jump, go from 50 years to 150 years. So you will run across different characters. So it is a little bit dense. You have to kind of stay alert to what's going on. So let's talk about kind of what to expect with this book. So it's an older book. This was written, goodness, 70 years ago now, like 70 something years ago, and the style of writing is different because reading sensibilities, the reader's sensibilities back then were very different. They had radio, at the time, and they had a little bit of TV. They had the classic films, but they didn't have the kind of inundation of media that we have now, of course. And so the style of writing is warranted to that sensibility of that time. So what am I talking about as far as the protagonists and the style of writing? Well, the first thing is I kind of want to say the eye opener for reading a book like this is you will not get introspection. You're not going to get introspection. You're going to get emotional reaction to things. You will get some pensive moments, like you'll get some character reacting to this, like, oh, what could this mean? Oh, this is scary, this is horrible, or this is how it's going to be. You'll get some internal dialogue with certain characters, but not introspection that we're used to now in the modern day, where we have to explore how a certain character is feeling. Like, the way they're feeling is kind of the anticipation of the way they're going to react to certain events. Characters here do react, and they react emotionally, but you will not get into their internal dialogue. You won't. You'll a little bit. It'll be peppered here and there, but not to the extent where you, as a modern day reader and viewer, would emotionally invest in a person. So the way, kind of like with the Thrawn trilogy and Luke Skywalker, like you're emotionally invested in a character like that, because he has many scenes where he's just with R2D2, and you're in his thought process, and you're feeling for him in his thought process. So that's the one thing to consider when reading this. You will not get that kind of internal thinking, that thought process, to the point where you might not find yourself emotionally invested in a character. These characters are pretty intriguing to me. They're pretty engaging, but they're not a character I would write in that I leave out their introspection. Introspection really is important, not just to me as a writer, but also important as a reader, as a modern day reader, and also just a viewer. If you're listening, to a television series, or listening to an audiobook, you people, when they're investing their time in a film, or investing their time in a book, most people going into that are trying to be emotionally invested in a character, or in an idea, or in a place. So that's the first thing. The next thing is, you have protagonists. Well, Harry Seldon, he's a protagonist, but he's really at the start of the book, and then he passes away, and then his legacy is what ensues. And that's not a spoiler alert. That's just part of the structure of the the story. Now, I think the prelude goes more into his younger years, so I think he would be a full-on protagonist then. But I don't know. I haven't read it. So, but so you've got two main protagonists, and then you've got other characters. You actually go into a little bit into the perspectives of political enemies of your main protagonists. And the protagonists have their arc. They have a complete arc. They have the rise and tension and climax of what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve, and then you have a resolution. But there's no overarching arc of a protagonist. For our modern day sensibilities, we expect the book to be all about that character. Yeah, we'll talk about featured characters. We'll go into the villain's mindset. We'll go into the other featured character's mindset. Maybe we'll go into the romantic interest, their mindset. We'll go into those different perspectives, but it's all about the central character for the book. It's their story, and we have important stories, surrounding it, kind of cushioning. Oh, I don't know what the verb is right now. We patting it down with good stuff. But so we have important featured characters. But as important as they are, as important as the villain is, they all revolve around the main character. We expect that as a modern day audience. With Isaac Asimov, you've got the protagonists, but they're in maybe 100 pages of the book. Maybe they're in 70 pages of the book. And then you move on to a different timeline and a different character altogether. So you've got good moments, you've got good character moments with these characters, but they don't complete the whole structure of the book. It's a character with his mission, a time jump to another character with his mission, and that's it. So be mindful of that. It's not written as you would write if Asimov were alive doing the Foundation in our day and age. He would probably have a bigger series of books involving one character. So maybe Salvor Hardin. I think that's his name. Hardin is his last name. It's his surname. Maybe the whole book would be centering around him. And then maybe there would be a love interest. Maybe there would be something involving his best friend and confidant. Maybe there would be something involving his war with the kings. And it would be all in this novel-length book. But we don't get that with Asimov. It's broken up into 5 stages, where we've got the middle or beginning, and then we've got the middle with the politicians and the mayors, and then we've got the end with the traders and the merchants. And that's fine for, to expect reading an older piece of fiction, 70 or 80 years ago. So just kind of expect that. Actually kind of expect that for a lot of the old classic science fiction, where it's like, okay, I'm with this protagonist. It's like, oh, that's the end of his story. Okay, I'm moving on to the next one. So again, it's conceptually very interesting. This story is very interesting, but don't go in thinking you're gonna just be following one character throughout the whole novel. So that's important to remember. Good night, Go Team Ghost Planet. Oh, you're leaving early. Thank you so much for saying the story sounds cool. I think it's very cool. All right. Now, a style of writing that I think was probably a lot more common in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and not common at all now. This is a particular trait, a writing trait back in the day, and that is action scenes are after the fact. Okay, so I did not get this with the first book. So this is Foundation, and then this is Foundation Empire. I am getting a lot more of this trait with this book, and I think it could put people off. Actually, I think it could put the modern day reader off. I'm fine with it, but I can see where people would be like, well, why couldn't we see this? So action scenes are after the fact, and I didn't mark the page for the second book, and that's okay because I'm still in the middle of the second book. But basically, action scenes don't happen in Asimov's Foundation. They're mentioned. So there's maybe this discourse between, a table full of men and politicians, or maybe a political, maybe like an imperial figure captures a person, captures a trader, and not trader, like a merchant. I gotta make that clear. So they'll capture this merchant, and then the merchant will say after the fact, like they'll say to the general, like the imperial, saying, "Oh yeah, you might want not to have your officers get into my things because one gadget blew this guy up." In so many words, like that's what happened. We don't see that as an action scene. We see that in the course of dialogue, saying the merchant says, "Don't have your officers touch my stuff. They don't know what they're doing." And then the general gets all huffy and mad that that happened. So you have to kind of have this kind of open mind when you're reading it. It's like, wait, that would have been a cool action scene. But because things have to progress over many, many years in these condensed, novels, that's kind of how it plays out with Asimov. There is action, and there's some tension with actual action, but a lot of like explosive, exploding scenes, they actually happen in the course of dialogue. That's a style of writing that is a lot more prevalent back then. It's not advisable to do that now. Like, I would say you probably could do something like that only if you actually do put in action scenes. So, something like saying, "Hey, General, have your guys get off my stuff because they're explosive." And one guy got a 2-foot hole in the chest. I guess you could have that in dialogue. So as long as you are actually aiding the story with actual action scenes. So be on the lookout for that. Okay. As I had said before, I'm reading off my notes. Characters, protagonists do have relatively short arcs, so be on the lookout for that. And their legacies, however, are mentioned by future characters, so they still have their legacies, but just kind of be mindful that that their arcs are short. And what else? Okay. So I did not see. I unless I wasn't paying attention, I did not see this in the first book. I am seeing this in the second book, and I hope it goes away. It's not my favorite. I'll still read it. Dialogue with some of the featured characters, and I hope it's not the main character, or whoever the main character is in that chapter or whatever. In this second book, I have seen dialogue that is pretty much exposition, or even worse than that. Even worse than exposition dialogue is run-on sentences. I've actually seen just 4 to 5 lines with no breaks, and I'm like, oh man, no. I know, even back then, even in a fictitious world, that was written in the 1940s or 50s. I know people want to have talk like that. So I think Asimov got a little lazy with his dialogue, at least in the second book. And I've only seen it with one character, so hopefully it's he actually has some pretty interesting characters in the second installment. But that run-on dialogue, I was like, oh no, is this? It's people like trying to tell other people like the reality of things and how things are going, and it's like, yeah, I guess that would be important to tell a resident of a planet that knows nothing about what's going on with the Empire or another side of the galaxy. So you could kind of get away with some exposition dialogue there. The exposition, is there a specific term, Prof? Is it expository or is it just called exposition dialogue? Like dialogue that just gives you exposition and information dumps and stuff like that. There's room for that if characters are from different parts of the galaxies. Maybe it's an imperial officer or general versus like a lowbrow merchant or whatever. Yeah, maybe you can get away with that. But at the same time, either one. Okay, thank you, Prof. But you kind of have to, like, the modern day reader does not like that. The modern day reader wants action and dialogue that's like, cut and dry. Like, okay, give me the scene, give me the point. Feed me with the mystery that you need to feed me with. Feed me the very barest minimum of information you need to feed me regarding the world, and then get me to the action scene, cut me to the chase. So that's just the modern day sensibilities. So again, when you're reading Asimov, just kind of expect a slower pace, as far as action and dialogue, and then also even run-on sentences. Things that editors today would say, no, don't talk like that. Don't have your characters talk like that. All right. It says, looks like Owen says, I want to avoid writing exposition dumps like the plague. I think exposition can't should be incorporated, but it needs to be. I'll say this. Write it in a way where your character already knows. Like, yeah, it's a tricky thing. You know, you're writing so much. What I'm trying to say, you are writing as much as your character knows, pretty much. So, all right. But the thing that Asimov has some, uh, I would say the strength of Asimov is that he, for all the dialogue, for all the run-on sentences, for the lack of action, even, he is good. Asimov is good at giving each character his personality and even idiosyncrasies, like the way they speak. Um, there's this one time where Hardin, basically at the end of his arc, he's like, and by that time we will be cozily dead. And I was like, I love how he says that. It's like, it's great. It's awesome. So using idiosyncrasies for different characters, that's perfect in science fiction, by the way. You want characters to sound different from one another. I would say that Asimov could be a little dry when it comes to, okay, this merchant kind of sounds like this politician, kind of sounds like this mathematician here. And I think, okay, by the way, I personally don't care. I do not care about this at all. The first book only has male characters. And to me, there's like, okay, that's how he wrote it, whatever. I think there's actually a female protagonist, I think in this second book, actually. If I remember her dealing with some, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Oh, I'm so excited to see this fictional character again. But she is a granddaughter of one of the earlier protagonists, and I think she's in the second book, if I remember correctly. That being said, she really will be the first female protagonist. So if people have like if they have sensibilities like, wait, there are no women in this book. There's like one woman, and she's like, what is she? She's like this really um bitter wife of is he a king, or he's some nobleman, and his father married his or her father married her to this nobleman who, just for political control, and she hates her husband. But she's very vain as well. They're all vain. It's not just the women; they're all vain. And I think she's the only woman to even speak in the first book. Now, does that mean the whole galaxy is full of men? No, I definitely know that there are women in the galaxy, and I picture women and men when they're talking about the general populace or the population. But that could put people off too. It's like, wait, okay, it's just all these men talking to each other. It's like, that's just how Asimov wrote it, So, well, no, she is not an old hag. She's not an old hag. She's I think she's described as fair, pale skinned, and black hair, but really cold eyes. And she does not like her husband because she was forced into marriage because of her father wanting some political alliance with another political party, and domination of the periphery and all that. She's vain like her husband, and his husband, they talk to each other, like the husband and wife talk to each other like they're so condescending to each other, but they speak in a very like polite air about them because they're noble. They're a noble, like they're of a royal class of some kind, but the resentment they have for each other is just dripping from their mouths. It's so funny. It's great. Oh, doted husband, who I was like, I'd have to find some great lines. But see. Let's see if I can find it really fast. If not, I'll welcome Blue Mage with Soul Edge. Let's see. I think this, yeah, chapter 6. I remember it being that one. Let's see. And then I'll probably, I actually did run out of water, so I might end the stream soon. Come on, chapter 6, where are you? Oh, that's chapter 7. Am I on the right? How is that chapter 4 and then chapter 7? Oh, I guess it's just really short chapters. Okay. Well, you know what? I think I know how the books are divided, and I just totally forgot. Well, we'll have to find the dialogue later, but it's really fun. It's they're not space elves at all. They're manipulative royals. Yeah, not at all. Okay, good night, Owen. So I think that's what I wanted to say about the world of Asimov, you know, without going into spoilers and stuff like that, and just kind of just the importance of science fiction and really, and actually, if anything, I'll end it on this quote by Rod Serling, who I think was involved with the Twilight Zone. Was he involved with the Twilight Zone? He says, "Science fiction is the improbable made possible." And the theme of science fiction, yeah, you can work with it with fantasy and all that. He also, I think, said fantasy was the impossible made probable, and science fiction was the improbable made possible. Yeah, I think that's what he said. But the theme for science fiction really is, how far should science go? You know, how far should humanity go before it ceases to be humanity? You know, I think that's the perfect theme for science fiction. It's like, how far should your technology go? How far should your science go before it becomes a thing of monstrosity? You know, it's kind of like with Frankenstein, you know? It's like, well, the science worked, but then the scientists looking upon his creation and the world looking upon the ugliness of his creation, even though it's a living being and a sentient being, it's like, oh no, you're a monster. It's like, well, give the person a chance. You created him, you got to give him a chance. You know, that was the theme of Frankenstein in a nutshell. And I think it's a good theme. It's like, how far should humanity go before it ceases to become humanity? Even if you think you solve the world's problems. And that's so wonderfully explored in science fiction. And yeah, I think it's pretty important. So I think the more I read Asimov and the more ideas I come up with Asimov, I will be reading the whole series, all 7 books, and I'll think about more things to talk about with writing and the importance of writing science fiction. I write science fiction, and if you write science fiction, you should read science fiction. And I'll hold myself accountable. If I write science fiction, I need to watch science fiction on TV. So anyway, but I will not be watching Asimovs Foundation as that adaptation. I think it's loosely inspired. I don't even think they're using the source material. I actually think you can work with the source material and have an effective adaptation. It would be very, very hard, because the reader's sensibilities for the modern day is different. The viewer sensibilities for the modern day is really different from what could be done back in the 1950s and 60s. So there's that to consider. So I kind of want to get a drink of water real fast, but maybe I'll just cruise on by. Oh my goodness, there's Adega Outlaw. Speaking of science fiction, I'm in the Asimov series right now, but Adega Outlaw has written. You've written a trilogy, right? Called Evolution, and I forgot, is Evolution out and we're waiting on the release of the second and third books? Are you waiting on the release of the third book? I'm not sure, but because I think I've seen you on Orville Nation, and people were saying how you were a writer of science fiction, and then I was looking at, and I went on your YouTube channel, and you have some very interesting ideas. So I really do want, before the end of the year, maybe in the fall, I'd like to at least touch on your first book. So 5 books. That's awesome. Just kind of like your avatar, which is great. Now I do see more people coming into the chat and wanting to talk, and I would love to talk, but I have got to get a drink of water. I gotta refill my cup. So if you guys are still interested in just like a few more minutes, we can chat. So Adega Outlaw says, second book comes out as soon as the artist is done. Okay. It's not a graphic novel, right? Are you just talking about like the book cover? So 5 books total. So 5 books total of this science fiction, because I know you were working on, aren't you working on like a dark fantasy as well? Which that's not really my genre, but I'm sure a lot of people would like to look at your dark fantasy. Oh, the book cover. Got it. Okay, cool. So the first book is out. And I think it's called Evolution, right? You know, I probably could find you on Amazon and just share your tab. And let's see. Hold on. Amazon. Not Rings of Power. Amazon. Is your pen name Adega Outlaw? I think it was, because I think I saw Adega Outlaw on in books. Sweet. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah, okay, so let me go ahead and share this real quick. If people can see this. Brave tab. Amazon. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that looks good. So the top one I'm seeing so that's called The Blood Witch, and I think you just confirmed that is more dark fantasy. Now Evolution here, I'm very interested in seeing and reading, because I'll just say it right now. I feel like this is another stream to talk about, but contemporary science fiction needs to change. I stopped reading contemporary science fiction, the published science fiction, because it just either was bad writing or was too preachy as far as being political. It had a definite agenda, or it was just characters I knew I couldn't invest in. And so I think if you start, like you Adega Outlaw, working on this Evolution, man, if you can write, I'll definitely talk about your science fiction. Yeah, I'll try to. I would like to do it at least by fall. By the first, get the first book by end of summer into the fall, because I was interested in reading at least Evolution. Let's see. You say you'll like it. The books are mostly novellas, but even Joe Malozzi loves it. Yeah, and he was the creator of Dark Matter, right? The television show. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool for him to say that. He seems like a really down to earth guy, so that's pretty cool. Really wonderful to see that. So let me go ahead and I'll stop sharing the screen. I gotta get a drink of water, guys, because I do want to announce also. I do also want to announce just a couple things what I'm thinking of doing this week as well. So hold that thought. Actually, I wonder if I can share my music. Let's go ahead and go to Sound Engraver and see. We'll go ahead and share that as well. Hopefully, you guys can hear the music when I share audio. Sound Engraver, share. See what that looks like. That looks good. Let's go to music. Let's go to River Sprint. Where's River Sprint? Oh, it's on the homepage. Yeah, River Sprint. And River Sprint actually probably doesn't work well with the audio, unless it's headphones. So let's try Primitive Supposition. And if you guys can hear that, maybe actually I can hear it. Oh, wait. No, wait. Hold on. Yeah, I can hear it. So I'll be right back. I'm going to get some water and all that good stuff. almost done, but I'll stop it. All right, stop sharing. Okay, so alrighty. So yeah, wonderful to see you, Adega Outlaw. Yeah, I think I just want a renaissance of contemporary science fiction that's actual science fiction. It's like the thing is the irony about science fiction when people are like, "Oh yeah, you got to use it as a political platform." It's like you can have completely political concepts in science fiction and it works great as a story. It's like Asimov when I was saying, he was talking about the dangers of having uh, a centralized government. And he does it in a wonderful way. So it's like, yeah, you don't have to be all preachy in science fiction because you can generate a wonderful story. So anyway, so it's all good, right? I stopped it. I stopped it. Okay. Good. All righty. So let's see. Let's see. Blue Mage with Soul Edge. First of all, Blue Mage, I'm a Final Fantasy fan, so good to have you. If it worked then, would it still work today unless it's archaic? I actually don't know what you mean. Oh, actually, I'm missing a couple people too. Okay. We'll get to that, but if you want to clarify what you mean by that. Gabriel Saliba, is that how you pronounce your name? One of the craziest is the setup with the Seldon and the psychohistory. There's a beautiful description of the first protagonist reaching the capital in a cloud height train station in a crazy aerial traffic. I know, it's wonderfully. I loved the introduction of Foundation. It's wonderfully depicted. It's just so good. So good. I mean, I'm so tempted to read it right now, but I won't. Yeah. It's great. It's just there's a lot to be had here. But yeah, I won't. Ugh. I should have prepared little excerpts to read out of, but might as well. It's like find it on $5 off of eBay. I found the second book for $4.95. Yeah, wonderfully done. Welcome, Gabriel. Let's see. Oh, and it's out as well. Yeah, your first book, Evolution. Very good. Very good. Let's see. I'm not sure what you mean, Blue Mage. Let's see. You'll like it. The books are mostly novellas. Yeah, and I read that. Yeah. And actually, I love that length. I do like the length of a novella. All right. Well, I think that might be everything. So let me go ahead and yeah. Blue Mage might be making comments that I can't keep up with, so so anyway. Oh, thank you though. Oh no, you're saying that sounds nice to Adega Outlaw. Okay, never mind. I thought you were talking to me. So what's on the dock for this week? Well, actually this week is probably gonna be pretty basic. I have to get one more promo video out by Thursday, and I think I'm just gonna be doing a straight promo DistroKid video. I would like to get out at least one Star Wars commentary from a previous stream, just to kind of condense it, just to let people know basically the evil of Disney is going to continue as long as YouTube exists. That's pretty much what it's going to be. It's not going to be titled that way, but just kind of my thoughts on the YouTube industry and how people want to see change, to their beloved franchises or in their beloved franchises. But it's like, unless people go cold turkey, as Young Ripper says, unless they go cold turkey, the evil that Disney produces, the lame content that it produces, it will never go away. And so I have some condensed thoughts. I'll put it to a video, but I'd like to actually pre-record a couple videos as well. I'd like to pre-record just Just some ideas, just concerning art, concerning different kinds of writing styles, or being alert of bad writing. What was one I was thinking of too? I can't remember off the top of my head. So kind of be on the lookout for more some commentary video and a promo video. So it's gonna be basic. I really need to get back to composition, and I really need to get back to SuperCollider. So for the month of July, go ahead and expect more original music videos, and then also um, uh, SuperCollider videos. I got to get back to SuperCollider again. I've been away all month because I've been so busy with these promo videos, and they're not getting that much views. I'm kind of disappointed. That's okay. I expect that. I expect that. That's all right. So next week on my stream, I'd really like to talk about the dulling of the senses. So we were talking about Isaac Asimov and his stories, and just the wonderful world that he created with his galactic scope, with the Empire and with the Foundation and with the political figures, economic figures in between. And of course, there's the series out, on Apple TV. I think it's Apple TV on the logo, but I keep thinking it's Paramount Plus. I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, I'm gonna show this next week. But if you guys just want to go ahead and look at the book covers that they have for that television series. So again, okay, book covers. Let's talk about book covers. We're gonna talk about this next week. It's important. Contrast. You got the orange and red, contrasting with the purple and blue, and the black and the silver inside. These colors pop out. Not the best book cover design, but it's functional, and it looks like science fiction. This got a picture of a city. I'm not a fan of the green and blue. It could have been a better set of colors, but the point is, the colors pop out, and you have kind of have a sci-fi image of really tall towers and stuff like that. Okay, so this is what science fiction looks like. Okay, we have an idea, like the atomic punk of the 70s, the beautiful illustrations of the 1950s and 60s, the color contrast from the muted colors to the colors that pop out and stuff like that. It's not all muted. If you go ahead, oh gosh, come on, do it right now. We're going to talk about this next week, so spoilers. I guess we probably should actually wrap it up, because it's almost at the 2-hour mark, but I'll talk about it definitely in length next week. The book cover designs that they have for the Asimov TV series is awful. It is absolutely awful. It is it's generic. It's kind of ambiguous. There's no real concrete design. There's no central figure. There's no central image of the book covers. It's all these muted colors, and the designs are really nebulous. It's like, oh, this is a sci-fi design. It's like, this is something I could come up with on Canva and do so much better. It's really generic. It's so basic. It's nothing memorable. It's nothing great. And the point I'm trying to make is that, why do we let people get away with that? Why do we let people get away with generic crud like the book covers for the Apple TV series Asimovs Foundation, where it really should look like science fiction? The book covers for this TV series really can look like anything. It could look like fantasy. It could look like contemporary romantic fiction of like the 1800s, and people are like, no, there are computer designs on the book cover and stuff like that. It's like, but you can't see it. It doesn't pop out. These designs don't pop out. They look like the muted colors of the Lord of the Rings appendices. The TV series. The films. Beautiful. It looks beautiful. But these book covers for Asimovs Foundation series look so generic, so muted. Nothing pops out. Nothing stands out. And this is an example of the dulling of the senses, where movie soundtracks are sounding the same. Gaming soundtracks are even sounding the same. Book covers are just not looking sharp and fresh and stuff like that. So I really want to talk about like what's causing our culture to really, settle for this kind of dulling of our senses. Like we're losing the ability to distinguish what is good and what is not. What looks like Asimov's Foundation and what does not look like Asimov's Foundation. And so we'll be talking about that. I'll come up with some examples. Maybe people in the chat can come up with some examples. But in any case, I think that's what I'm gonna end with there. Oh yeah, absolutely. Postmodern art, absolutely, and it's not cool. It's not cool. Yeah, yeah, well put. Conquest of mediocrity. So that's very important. So in contrast to a book cover like yours, where you have a central figure, the eye, that says something. It's like something's gonna happen. Something is happening. So all right. So I think that's everything I'll say for now. So yeah, be on the lookout for some more commentary. One little short promo video for because I was paid to do it and I got to do it by the end of the month, so I got to stick to that deadline. And then also just more commentary on just popular art in general. And then getting into July, I'm back in SuperCollider. I'm back with original music. I'm ready to get back into my composing. It's been like a good 2 weeks since I've done actual composing because I've been so busy. So, in any case, thank you so much for watching and listening. Always produce and promote and preserve the good art that you love. And I will catch you later. Thanks for watching.